What happens when a simple favor spirals into something unexpected? Join Mike as he navigates the twists and turns of a fake relationship with Sarah, a girl he barely knew in high school. What starts as a harmless charade to appease her family quickly evolves into a connection that neither of them saw coming. Will they be able to sort through their feelings, or will the lines between fake and real become too blurred to handle? Stick around to find out, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more captivating stories. I hadn't anticipated anything special when Sarah rang me out of nowhere. It had been ages since our paths had last crossed during high school, where we'd shared a few uncomfortable moments, the occasional laugh, and quite a collection of memories. We'd never been particularly tight, yet somehow we had managed to keep in loose contact through social media, liking each other's updates and dropping the rare comment here and there. But when her name flashed across my screen, I wasn't ready for what was coming next. "Hey, Mike," she greeted, her tone warm but edged with a hint of nervousness. "I really need a big favor, and I know this might sound completely out there, but I'm hoping you'll go along with it." I hesitated, not sure where this was headed. Of all the things I could have imagined, Sarah reaching out to ask me for help wasn't one of them. We weren't exactly close friends, but there was something about her that was hard to turn down. "What's going on?" I replied, trying to sound laid back even as I braced myself for something that felt far from straightforward. "I need you to act like you're my boyfriend," she said, as if it were the most normal request in the world. I stared for a second, not sure I had heard her correctly. "Wait, come again?" "Yeah," she rushed on, clearly catching my confusion. "It's just temporary, I swear. It's not what you think. No weird stuff, just pretend for my family's sake. They're starting to think I'm some kind of disaster." My thoughts scrambled to catch up. I hadn't expected this kind of ask, but Sarah had always been unpredictable like that. She wasn't shy about making bold moves or reaching out when she needed something, still pretending to be her boyfriend. For how long? And why pick me of all people? My pulse quickened. "Okay, what's the real deal?" "I'm not exactly boyfriend of the year material," I told her. She let out a nervous laugh. "There's no hidden trick, I promise. It's mostly about my dad. He's constantly on my case about how I'm single, focused too much on work and not settling down. I just need someone to come with me to a family thing next weekend and help sell the idea that I'm doing fine in the romance department." It sounded absurd, like a storyline ripped from some romantic comedy, but she was serious. And honestly, I didn't have much going on. Saying yes felt easier than letting her down. Besides, it didn't sound all that difficult. "All right," I agreed, still half in disbelief at my own answer. "I'm in, but you owe me huge for this." "Oh, I know," she replied quickly. "I swear I'll make it worth it. It's only for a few days. You won't regret it." I could sense how relieved she was. We spent a little more time figuring out the details where we'd meet, what to expect, and decided I'd head over to her place the following weekend. Our mission: to pull off the perfect couple act in front of her family. Sounded easy enough, at least in theory, but once the call ended, I felt a knot forming in my stomach. Pretending to date someone, especially Sarah, felt like walking into chaos with my eyes wide open. She was stunning, self-assured, and had this effortless confidence I didn't think I could keep up with. Still, she had already put her faith in me, so it felt too late to change my mind. What was there to lose, really? The week slipped by faster than I'd expected. Though I tried to push the whole fake relationship scenario to the back of my mind, I kept replaying it in my head. What should I wear? How would I act around her folks? Would her dad buy it? Would anyone? I did my best to stay grounded and not overanalyze it. After all, this was just pretend. Nothing real, no pressure. Then Saturday showed up, and I was standing in front of the mirror, adjusting my shirt for what felt like the millionth time. I hadn't been this anxious over a simple dinner in a long time. My outfit looked okay, not over the top, but decent enough. Sarah had already briefed me about her family, especially her dad, who she warned had little patience for anyone who came off as a soft, fake kind of boyfriend. When I got to her place, she opened the door with a beaming smile that was just a little too cheerful, like she was fully aware of how crazy this plan was, but still totally committed. She looked amazing in a simple dress, her hair done just right, We exchanged quick greetings before she guided me into the living room to face the family. Her dad was just as she had described, stern, serious, and a little intimidating. But there was also a biting humour hidden underneath that appeared once he warmed up a little. Her mum, in contrast, was immediately friendly, cracking jokes about how happy she was that Sarah had finally brought someone home. Right then, I realised this wasn't going to be as easy as I'd hoped. Dinner began, and everything felt slowed down like I was stuck in a surreal dream. We made small talk, and Sarah kept giving me these light-hearted looks, as if to reassure me it was all under control. I played along, laughing politely at her dad's dry comments, trying to keep my cool. But as the evening went on, something started to feel different. There was this subtle connection between us, not obvious, nothing blatant, but I noticed it. The way our hands touched when we reached for the same cup. The brief glances we shared when the others were talking. It felt oddly real in a way I hadn't anticipated. By the time night fell, we were all outside on the porch sipping coffee. Her dad gave me a quiet nod, the kind that said I'd passed whatever invisible test he'd been putting me through. And it struck me he believed it. He actually thought we were legit. Sarah smiled at me then, and I saw something in her expression, a mix of relief and playful mischief. She could tell I was a bit shaken by how real it had started to feel. She leaned in slightly, her voice soft. "Thanks for doing this. You really came through for me." I nodded, doing my best to keep my thoughts in check. "No problem. Just don't forget what you owe me." She grinned at that, clearly pleased. But there was something different I caught in her expression, something I hadn't noticed before. It was a glimmer, a brief flash of something sincere. I sensed it instantly, and that small sign would end up altering everything. No matter how hard I tried to tell myself it was just a performance, something inside me was certain it wasn't. And as I sat beside Sarah, pretending to be her boyfriend, I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, this whole thing was about to become a lot more genuine than I had anticipated. The following days felt surreal, like I had slipped into a version of life that wasn't quite real. I couldn't stop thinking about the fact that I was now play-acting as Sarah's partner, not just in front of her relatives, but in front of her friends, and even people we didn't know. What made it all more unsettling was that, even though I knew we were faking it, I started to feel things I hadn't prepared for. It was never meant to turn into something meaningful. We were simply two people helping each other out, agreeing to a short-term act to avoid some awkward family tension. But the more hours I spent with Sarah, the harder it became to see it as just make-believe. The way she laughed, the brightness in her eyes when she talked, the way her fingers would gently brush my arm mid-conversation, it all felt too natural. And to make things harder, she was incredibly easy to talk to. She had a way of making everything feel light and uncomplicated. That Saturday, she asked me to join her on a pretend date dinner and a movie, just the two of us. The idea was simple: play the part of a couple for one night, and if anyone asked, we'd brush it off as no big deal. But when I showed up at her place and saw her in that dress, one that struck the perfect balance between laid back and classy, my heart skipped a beat. She looked incredible, and for a moment I completely forgot why we were doing any of it. I wasn't supposed to be reacting this way. I was supposed to stay in character. "Hey, Mike, ready for our big night?" Sarah said with a wide grin that only made it harder to keep my feelings in check. Her excitement was contagious, and although I tried to remain cool, I found myself smiling right back. "Yeah, definitely," I answered, attempting to sound nonchalant. "You look amazing, by the way." "Thanks, you're not looking too bad yourself," she replied, giving me a playful wink. I couldn't help but notice she was teasing me more than usual, and the way her gaze lingered on me, it made the entire evening feel too close to real. As we walked out to the car, I could feel the tension rising. We were meant to be putting on a show, but with the way Sarah was acting, I started to question if this was something more. I wasn't prepared for the emotions that were starting to come up. The last thing I expected was to fall for someone who wasn't even supposed to be my real girlfriend. The restaurant was charming, not fancy, but the kind of spot where people celebrated special moments or had first dates. The lights were low, each table glowed with candlelight, and soft music filled the space alongside cheerful chatter. It was the ideal setting for a couple pretending to be in love. We were placed at a table near the window, and I couldn't shake a slight nervousness, not from uncertainty about what to do, since I'd watched enough romantic comedies to know the drill, but because everything felt strangely effortless. When she smiled at me from across the table, I could feel my pulse quicken. I wasn't supposed to be attracted to her. I wasn't meant to enjoy the way she looked at me, or how she leaned in a little closer whenever we spoke. "So, Mike," she said, stirring her drink with a relaxed motion. "How's work going?" "Still at the marketing place?" "Still there," I replied, doing my best to concentrate on the conversation rather than the way her mouth moved as she talked. "It's a little slow lately, but it covers the expenses." She gave a thoughtful nod, her gaze never straying from mine. "Sounds like things are going all right. I'm glad to hear you're doing okay." Something in her tone told me it wasn't just polite conversation anymore. It felt like she actually meant it. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about playing a part anymore. Somewhere in the middle of all this, I had started to care. I wanted to learn more about her, to be around her not because I had to, but because I genuinely wanted to. "Thanks, Sarah," I said, glancing at my menu for a second to gather my thoughts. "What about you? How's everything at the design firm? Still crushing it?" She laughed softly and gave a little shrug. "Yeah, it's going good. Super busy, but I like the fast pace. You know how it is. We've got a few new clients, so there's a lot going on." We chatted a bit more while we ordered, but something had shifted. What started as casual banter began to feel much more personal. I couldn't pretend anymore. The boundary between make-believe and real life had started to fade, and I could tell Sarah felt it too. There was a look in her eyes, something deeper than our pretend couple routine. She wasn't acting anymore either. Dinner passed quickly, and the entire time I had this growing sense that something fundamental had changed. We shared laughs, traded stories, and joked like we'd known one another forever. But underneath all of that was an undeniable pull, one that existed in the pauses, the glances, and the silence between our words. It wasn't the kind of connection that happened randomly. It felt real. When the bill came, I instinctively reached for it. "I'll take care of this," I said, trying to maintain some control over the situation. She gave me a curious look. "I thought this was just a pretend date," she teased. Even though she wasn't exactly complaining, I could tell she enjoyed testing my patience. "I know," I replied, offering a crooked grin. "But it just feels like the right move." I glanced at her. "Besides, you're the one who dragged me into all of this, so picking up the tab is the least I can do." She chuckled quietly and leaned back in her seat. "You're quite the gentleman, I like that." We exited the restaurant and made our way to the cinema. Catching a movie was simply another step in the whole charade, but once we were seated in the dark theatre, a strange energy filled the space between us. Our shoulders touched slightly due to how close we sat, and for a brief second I debated pulling away. But I didn't, and neither did she. It was as if something unseen was drawing us together. Halfway through the film, Sarah turned her head toward me. The screen's glow danced in her eyes. "Mike," she murmured so softly I barely heard her. "Can I ask you something?" "Yeah, of course," I whispered, trying not to let my nerves show. She waited a beat, then said, "Does this feel weird to you? The pretending, I mean?" Her question caught me off guard and I had to pause. "Honestly, yeah, a bit," I admitted, "but not nearly as uncomfortable as I imagined it'd be." She smiled faintly, and for a moment the whole thing seemed genuine, like we weren't pretending anymore. Not her, not me. We drove back in silence, the evening's events looping through my thoughts. I kept mentally replaying each look, each conversation. I'd been acting. That much was true. But now I was starting to question if it was still an act at all. Maybe something real was happening here, something I hadn't counted on. When we pulled up outside her place, she faced me with a look that was both calm and sincere. "Thanks for tonight," she said softly. "You made it a lot easier." I smiled back, but inside I was a mess. "Anytime it was fun," I answered. Just let me know if you need me again. She nodded, but before stepping out of the car, she leaned over and pressed a kiss to my cheek. It was brief, but the sensation lingered, and I sat frozen in place. That moment wasn't planned. Not part of the script, but it happened anyway. Good night, Mike, she said gently, then slipped out and shut the door behind her. As I drove off, my heart pounded against my chest. It wasn't supposed to feel like this, but it did. That's when it hit me this fake relationship wasn't just make-believe anymore. It was starting to feel real. The next week felt like a blur. I found it harder and harder to overlook the growing tension between Sarah and me. Even though we were still officially just putting on a show, every time we met for another date or a family get-together, things felt more authentic, and that realization terrified me. I had promised myself this was only a short-term thing, a favor with no emotional strings attached. I wasn't seeking anything serious, but as I spent more time with Sarah, I noticed something shifting in me, a feeling I hadn't expected. Something was forming between us, something genuine, and it was getting stronger by the day. That Friday, we had arranged another staged dinner, this time at a friend's place. The goal was simple: act like we were dating so her friends wouldn't ask questions. But somehow, the situation felt more intense this time. Sarah had been texting me non-stop, asking for my opinion on what to wear and whether her outfit might be too flashy. I didn't understand why, but those messages made me feel like this was bigger than I'd originally thought. When I got to her apartment, I could see right away that she was anxious. She kept pacing the floor, running her fingers through her hair like she was trying to perfect every little thing. Hey, Mike, sorry, She cut herself off and let out a nervous laugh, clearly flustered. I'm overthinking. It's just dinner with friends, no need to stress. I gave her a reassuring smile. Relax, you look amazing. She paused, glanced at me, then smirked. You're not just saying that because you're supposed to, are you? Nope, I replied with a sincere grin. I mean it. You look stunning. And I meant it, more than I'd realized before the words even came out. She wasn't just pretty in a casual way at that moment, she was stunning. That realization struck me hard. This wasn't a harmless charade anymore. I was truly affected by her. The car ride to her friend's place was filled with uneasy silence and bits of nervous chatter. Neither of us really knew how to behave. We were still in character, but something inside me had changed. I could tell Sarah felt it too. She kept to herself, fiddled with her phone, occasionally casting glances in my direction, as if trying to reassure herself that everything was still okay. When we arrived, her friends welcomed us warmly and we slipped into our roles with ease. Mike and I have been together a while now, Sarah said with a smile as she introduced me to the group. The way she said it, it rolled off her tongue so naturally, like it was the truth. The evening unfolded as expected. We ate, chatted, and mingled with her friends. But I couldn't stop focusing on how often Sarah would look my way, as if making sure I was still with her in the act. And every time she did, I felt something stir in me, an invisible pull I couldn't explain. Apparently, I wasn't the only one sensing something off. At one point, while Sarah stepped away to the restroom, her friend Rachel pulled me aside. Okay, I have to ask, Rachel said, her voice light but edged with curiosity. Is it just me? Or do you two seem way too into each other for a fake couple? I let out a nervous laugh, unsure what to say. I guess we've just gotten used to playing the part, especially around family. She raised a skeptical eyebrow. I don't know. You two act like you've been a real couple forever. I shifted in place, feeling the tension. We're just good at faking it, I replied. But the look she gave me said she didn't entirely buy that explanation. Just as she was about to continue, Sarah came back, and the topic quickly turned to something more cheerful. Still, Rachel's words stuck with me. Was it really that easy to tell? Could it be that Sarah and I weren't pulling off our act as well as we believed? The night wrapped up on a good note, with everyone expressing their gratitude and saying they looked forward to getting together again. On the way back, Sarah was oddly silent. Everything okay? I asked, attempting to break the quiet. She gave a small sigh and looked over at me. I'm not sure, she said, her expression uncertain. Things feel complicated. Complicated, I echoed, puzzled. What are you talking about? I don't even know how to explain it, she murmured, nervously chewing her lip. I've been thinking about this pretend relationship we've got going on. It's not just pretend anymore. It feels real now. Her words hit me hard. Suddenly, everything clicked. She was feeling the same as I was. This wasn't some harmless role play anymore. We had crossed a line, and it was more serious than either of us planned. Yeah, I said quietly, my voice barely audible. I've been thinking that too. We finished the ride without speaking, each of us deep in thought. When we pulled up to her building, Sarah said nothing as she stepped out of the car. She just gave me a faint smile and walked away, leaving me alone to take in everything that had just happened. In the days that followed, the tension didn't ease. If anything, it got worse. I couldn't stop thinking about Sarah. Every time we talked or spent time together, it felt like something new was forming between us, something real I didn't know how to ignore or let go of. But I still had no clue what to do about it. Then one night, something unexpected happened. I bumped into Sarah at the grocery store. It wasn't planned, we just happened to be there at the same time. She noticed me right away and came over with a smile. "Hey Mike, what are the chances?" she said, glancing at my shopping cart. "Stocking up for a big meal?" I laughed. "Something like that. Just grabbing stuff for the week." We chatted for a few moments, and as we were about to part ways, she suddenly reached out and took my hand, holding it gently before letting go. "See you soon," she said softly. As she walked away, I stood there frozen, her touch still lingering on my skin. It had caught me off guard. I hadn't seen that coming, and now I was more confused than ever. What did that mean? Was she feeling what I was? Or was I reading into things that weren't really there? I couldn't tell anymore. All I knew was that something had shifted, and I didn't know how to make sense of it. The following days passed in a daze, like everything around me had slowed down but felt somehow more urgent. I couldn't stop thinking about Sarah, especially after that moment in the store. The simple act of her holding my hand had stirred something in me that wouldn't fade. And truthfully, I didn't want it to fade. Still, reality kept reminding me this wasn't supposed to be real. We had made an agreement and this was meant to be fake. But now I wasn't even sure what was real anymore. We hadn't brought up the grocery store moment since it happened. Instead, we went on like usual. I'd take her to dinner at her parents' house or hang out with her at her place, going through the motions of our setup. But something was different. It was in the way we met each other's eyes, how we talked just a bit longer than we needed to, how our laughter seemed too heartfelt to be pretend. That Friday, Sarah asked if I'd join her for dinner at a restaurant she'd been excited about for weeks. At first, I hesitated, but then I figured, it's just dinner. I could manage that, right? After all, we were still playing pretend. Just dinner. When I showed up to pick her up, she was already by the door, wearing a dress that was both simple and stunning. The moment I saw her, my heart jumped. It was ridiculous, we were just acting, right? But no matter how many times I reminded myself, I couldn't ignore what I felt when I looked at her. "You look incredible," I said, trying to keep things casual. "Thanks," she answered, smiling. "I wanted to look nice for you, for us, for the whole fake relationship thing." I smiled back, though it didn't quite reach my eyes. "Well, you do. Come on, let's go." On the way to the restaurant, we made small talk, the kind of comfortable chatter we'd gotten used to. But I kept noticing how she kept looking at me, her eyes holding just a bit longer than they used to, like she was hoping I'd say something I didn't know how to say. When we got to the restaurant, the staff welcomed us warmly and led us to a table by the window. It was the kind of setting that felt personal, even a little too romantic for two people who weren't supposed to be a real couple. Right then, I had a feeling this wasn't going to be one of our regular nights. As we sat and looked over the menu, I could feel a weight hanging between us, something unspoken but very real. We ordered a bottle of wine, and when our glasses were filled, Sarah lifted hers. "To us," she said gently, her smile soft. "To us," I repeated, clinking my glass with hers. Dinner began like usual. We ate, we laughed, and we talked. But underneath all of it was something else, something deeper, quietly growing between us. I couldn't ignore it. But I couldn't help but notice the way Sarah kept watching me, almost like she was trying to read my expressions, and I was doing the exact same thing. Every single word, every little move, every smile between us felt heavy with unspoken intent. As the night went on, the dialogue shifted into more intimate territory. We started opening up about our lives, our goals, our families, all topics we hadn't really touched on before. And with each sentence, I could sense the emotional walls we'd both put up slowly breaking down. Then she said, her tone dropping just a little. So, what do you think about all this? The whole pretending to date situation. Do you feel like we're making the right choice? I didn't reply right away. The question hit me unexpectedly, and it made me aware of how hard I'd been trying to avoid confronting how I truly felt. I had kept telling myself repeatedly that this was only a favor, nothing more, nothing real, that I wasn't emotionally tied to any of it. But looking at Sarah just then, seeing how her eyes searched mine, hoping for some kind of answer, I understood how dishonest I'd been with myself. I think we crossed a line, I finally admitted, speaking slowly, my voice barely above a whisper. This doesn't feel like we're faking it anymore, Sarah. She paused for a moment, her eyes locked on mine, lips slightly parted in shock. I know, she said quietly. It really doesn't, and I don't know what we're supposed to do about that. I swallowed hard, my thoughts spiraling. We had actually said it, and that meant we couldn't go back to pretending it wasn't real. This was no longer just some convenient setup. I had genuinely started to care about her, and judging by the way she looked at me, I was sure she felt the same. But that only made the situation even messier. Before I could say anything else, the waiter arrived with dessert, though neither of us paid it any attention. Instead, we remained quiet, the weight of our conversation hanging in the air like a thick fog. Eventually, I broke the silence. So, what do we do now? I asked, my voice slightly trembling. Do we just go back to acting like none of this matters, or do we try to figure out what's really going on between us? Sarah didn't speak immediately. She lowered her eyes to her hands, then looked up at me again, her expression torn and unsure. I'm not sure, she admitted. I've been wishing we could rewind, pretend this never got complicated. But honestly, I know deep down that's not realistic. Everything's different now, Mike. I slowly nodded. Yeah, it really is. We stayed seated for a while longer, the tension between us thick enough to feel. My heart was pounding and I could see that same nervous energy mirrored in her expression. We both recognized that there was no returning to the way things were, but neither of us had the faintest idea how to take the next step. Then, without a single word spoken, we both stood up. It was as if some silent agreement had passed between us. The night had reached a turning point, and we could both feel it. Walking out of the restaurant side by side, I was overwhelmed by the realization of how much had shifted between us. What started as a false relationship had crumbled into something real, something we couldn't pretend away. And now we stood on the edge of a reality we hadn't planned for, one that couldn't be undone. What lay ahead was uncertain, and neither of us had the answer. The following days went by in a blur, a storm of confusion, emotional chaos, and a desperate attempt to regain control over something that had clearly slipped beyond our grasp. That talk in the restaurant had cleared up one thing. Sarah and I weren't pretending anymore. But what that truly meant for us, for our connection, for everything we'd created over the last few months, that was the question that kept echoing. We hadn't spoken much since that evening. It was a strange sort of silence, filled with uneasiness and things we were both too afraid to say. Sarah had sent a few messages checking in, but every one of them felt like it was walking a tightrope between friendship and something far more serious. Each time her name appeared on my screen, my heart jumped. And I hated that part of me eagerly anticipated every message, even though I knew we couldn't simply go back to what we had before. By Friday evening, I finally made the decision to call her. I had spent the entire week caught up in my own thoughts, reliving each moment we'd shared. I couldn't keep doing it. I had to hear her voice, to talk to her. Hey, it's me, I said when she answered, trying to keep my tone calm. Hey, Mike, she replied, sounding almost relieved to hear from me. I was starting to wonder when you'd reach out. I drew in a long breath, trying to slow my racing thoughts. I think we need to talk. Like, really talk. There was a pause before she answered. Yeah, I agree. Can you meet me tomorrow? I hesitated for a second, then gave a small nod, even though she couldn't see it. Yeah, let's meet at the park. The one we went to last week. Okay, I'll see you there, she said, her voice quiet, almost unsure. The next day, I drove to the park with my stomach in knots. My thoughts were a mess. What exactly was I hoping to get out of this? Was I truly ready to face how I felt? When I spotted Sarah sitting on that same bench, the one where we'd first talked about faking our relationship, I couldn't help. But notice how everything felt different. She appeared the same, yet there was a vulnerability in her eyes that made everything feel much more genuine. I inhaled deeply and moved over to her. Hey, I said, sitting next to her. Thanks for meeting me. She offered a small smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Of course. I think we both know we needed this. We sat in silence for a few moments, neither of us sure of how to begin. Finally, I broke the quiet. I've been thinking a lot about everything, I started, about the whole fake boyfriend thing and where we go from here. Sarah looked at me, her gaze firm. Me too, and honestly, Mike, I've realized something I don't want to keep pretending. I've fallen for you, and I can't keep acting like I haven't. Her words hit me like a wave, and I felt a pressure in my chest. Sarah, I began, my voice barely audible. I feel the same way. She blinked in surprise at my confession. You do? I nodded, taking her hand in mine. Yeah. From the moment we started this fake thing, I thought I was just doing you a favor. But the more time we spent together, the more I realized I didn't just want to be your fake boyfriend. I wanted to be with you for real. She squeezed my hand, her eyes filling with emotion. I've been so scared, Mike. Scared of ruining our friendship, scared of what this could mean. But now that you've said it, I feel like maybe we're meant to be more than just friends. I smiled gently, feeling a burden lift from my shoulders. We don't have to have all the answers right now. We can take it slow, but I want to see where this leads for real. We sat there for a while, the words coming easily now, each one loosening the tension that had built up between us over the past few weeks. We talked about our fears, our hopes, and the uncertainty of what the future might bring. But there was one thing we both knew for sure, whatever this was, it wasn't fake, and it wasn't going away. Later that evening, we strolled through the park, hand in hand, our hearts beating in sync. I had never felt so at peace and yet so alive all at once. This was real, and despite the fear and unknowns, I was ready to face it all with Sarah by my side. As the sun began to set, we stopped at the same spot where we had shared our first real conversation. I turned to her, taking in the way the light danced on her face, the way her eyes gleamed with the promise of something new. Are you sure about this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Are you sure about us? She nodded, her smile wide and full of certainty. Yes, I'm sure. And in that moment, everything made sense. We had crossed a line, but not the kind that separated us. We had crossed a line that brought us closer together, that made us more than just a fake couple. We were real, and that was all that mattered. As we shared a quiet kiss under the fading light, I knew that everything that had brought us here, every moment of confusion, every awkward conversation, every pretend date had been worth it. Because in the end, the fake had become real, and I was exactly where I was meant to be.